Everybody, it's Wardy here. It's December 2nd, 2025. It's our second video that we're dropping on the platform today, all regarding the latest news and rumblings in Mets land. And of course, if you did not check out our live stream, live reacting to the Devin Williams signing at 3 years over $45 million from this past night, or our video that dropped around 8 a.m. Eastern earlier today, breaking down how Edwin Diaz is absolutely in the cards for the New York Mets still, even after signing one Devin Williams, please make sure to watch that content in case you guys haven't after watching this one. That way you're very caught up, because we're going to start our conversation today to talk a little bit more on Devin Williams, specifically a key report that came out through The Athletic earlier today, highlighting everything that led to Williams signing with the New York Mets, including how Devin did in fact turn down offers from other top contending teams. So what was it about the Mets that really sold Devin Williams to want to not only stay in New York, but this time go to a crosstown rival, is what we'll talk about. From there, we'll get into why you likely clicked on this video. Jeff Passan of ESPN came out with a really important piece breaking down the top 25 trade candidates this offseason, the likelihood of them being dealt, and ultimately where they could be dealt based on his reporting and what he knows in the industry at this point. And what if I told you that not only does the New York Mets have themselves mentioned quite a bit in this article, but the Mets are connected to not one, not two, not three, not four, not five. We're talking a whopping 13 players that Jeff Passan has connected here with the New York Mets. So we'll get into which players are more likely than others as a feasible fit for the Mets. Which guys do we hope to see land in Queens over others? And speaking of trade options, let's talk about Jeff McNeil, as the likelihood of this man being dealt this offseason is greater than any other player for the most part that Jeff Passan broke down in his latest piece. No, I'm not exaggerating. That's a fact. So let's go ahead and deep dive it all, everybody. All I ask is that you guys hit that like and subscribe on your way in, as it's a great way to support the platform. And let me know your initial reactions, thoughts, and analysis to Jeff McNeil being such a likely trade chip for the Mets this offseason that we'll all be shocked at this point if he is in fact still on this Mets roster come spring training of 2026, as well as the abundance of players that we're going to break down in today's video. Which ones are most appealing to you and why? Let me know down below. Hit those buttons. Thank you again for 36,000 subscribers. We'll be giving away a jersey to one lucky subscriber as a thank you for that latest milestone on Monday, December 8th, day 2 of winter meeting coverage that we will have here on the platform. Make sure you chime in for our evening live streams, as we will be giving away that jersey to one lucky fan. And of course, shout out to SeatGeek that has you covered for all of your ticketing needs. Simply utilize my promo code WARDY10, link down below in the description. That way you too get 10% off whatever you need in the ticketing space. Whether it's NFL tickets, NBA tickets, NHL tickets, concerts, comedies, you name it, SeatGeek always has you covered. Link down below, WARDY10 for 10% off your next ticket purchase. Now, folks, let's get right into this one. And like I said, let's begin today's discussion by talking a little bit more on the new acquisition for the New York Mets, and that being in one Devin Williams, because there's a lot to talk about in regards to Devin Williams, and for good reason, mind you. I'm very excited to get in Devin Williams. I know I'm not the only person to say that. And listen, I've had a lot of Yankees fans ragging on me the past 24 hours because they are the same type of fans that would actually buy in more to a lack of success of 2 months of a player versus a track record of 5 consecutive years being one of the best relievers in Major League Baseball. They will also continue to ignore the great progress that Devin Williams had in the second half of this past season in the Yankees, where he actually did really well at home in the Bronx, and he didn't fare as well on the road. But I understand these things are hard to comprehend for a fan base that, of course, is not as locked in as they should be. A lot of casuals, to say the least. I'm sure I'm going to see plenty more of them in the comments down below. Not to my Yankee fan followers that are awesome, are supportive, regardless of what's happening in Metsland. I appreciate you guys. But to the schmucks out there, you know exactly who I'm talking about. But let's go on now and let's first break down this key report that came from, yes, Will Salmon of The Athletic, great friend of the platform. Hope Will is doing fantastic. Will, of course, had the scoop, first broke the news that Devin Williams is signing with the New York Mets or this past night. And as I said it, and I'll say it one more time, I love the fact that Will Salmon, a man who used to be on the beat for the Milwaukee Brewers during David Stearns' tenure, who has now been on the beat covering the Mets through the Athletic each of the past couple seasons, was the first to break the news, because he knows Devin Williams better than most right now on the beat, especially from a national level. The guy covered him extensively during his time there in Milwaukee, and now after a nice little pit stop there in the Bronx, just like Juan Soto, this man is now landing in Flushing, Queens with the New York Mets. But some key notes in this article that I would like to highlight, and of course you guys can check out the piece in its entirety. Will does a fantastic job. Cannot amplify that enough. Very grateful to have him on the platform over this past week. Now, again, a week removed right before the news of Devin Williams becoming a New York Met, so that was pretty cool. But a couple things that he states in this article that I really want to highlight are the following. One, Devin Williams, as a surprise absolutely nobody, had a lot of suitors. And like the Mets, many other teams viewed him as a clear bounce back candidate. Why? Because when you exclude that baseline ERA of 4.79 this past season, all the expected and underlying numbers tell you that Devin Williams just had as good of a season as he's ever had in his career. And if he didn't have the incompetent Anthony Volpe or Jason Dominguez that literally makes Juan Soto look like a platinum glove in the corner, I wish that was as much of an exaggeration as maybe what you're initially thinking, but it's not. Dominguez was horrendous defensively this past year. These lack of defensive plays in the outfield and infield for the Yankees absolutely hurt guys like Devin Williams when looking at the amount of success they had in their first and only year there and the Bronx. But we know it was an adjustment period for Devin Williams, and he really settled down nicely. And because of that, and because of the fact they still struck out guys at a whopping 13 plus strikeouts per nine to walks per nine, the best in his career since the shortened 2020 season, they're at 3.6 walks per nine. A lot of people love Devin Williams and his value in this market, so much so that there were 5 plus teams that Devin Williams said no to that gave very competitive top offers to. And yes, there was more than one team that gave Devin Williams a 3-year contract offer. It was not just the New York Mets. Yet even then, Devin Williams, knowing that it was not a certainty as to what his role will be in this Mets bullpen, said, yes, I want to be here. So what about Devin Williams, who's on this 3-year, $45+ million contract with a $6 million bonus, that I would first like to clarify and correct myself on something. I stated in last night's live stream, as well as today's video earlier today, that the $6 million bonus does not count towards the tax. That is factually incorrect, and I would like to first apologize for that, because I have no problem, of course, admitting when I'm wrong, and unfortunately, sometimes these things just naturally happen while I'm covering a lot of things in a very short period of time, and maybe I'm not always going to be right, and that was one of those circumstances, so my apologies for that. So instead of his contract, what we initially thought being around $10 million of average annual value impacting the Mets luxury tax right now across 3 years, so $30 million total, because remember, $15 million is deferred money, including $5 million per season. But even with doing all the math and how it's broken down when John Heyman first posted about this, what it comes down to is just over $14 million, around 14.7 to be exact, average annual value is what will be accounted for the tax for the Mets for each of the next 3 seasons. Point stands, even at 14.5 or so million per year, this is a fantastic bargain contract for the New York Mets, as long as Williams is not a guarantee to be their closer next season. And here's the thing, Devin Williams has stated himself, he has more than enough of an appetite to be the setup man for the New York Mets, to pave the door and pave the way rather for Edwin Diaz to return on a big contract. And the Mets deferring $15 million of this deal makes it look less like a closer type deal and more like a setup deal, and it does in fact put the Mets in prime position to go out of their way for Edwin Diaz yet again. Something that we all haven't expected them to do, something that's been constantly relayed through the media since the Mets have in fact signed Williams that it's going to happen. But needless to say, the Mets have landed themselves, in my opinion, one of the best relievers in baseball. This is a multi-time Trevor Hoffman Reliever of the Year award winner during his time in Milwaukee. Now Edwin Diaz, a 2-time Trevor Hoffman award winner himself, including this past season. Imagine how dynamic of a duo that they would be. Again, Devin Williams, guys, you know the drill, but let me enlighten you just in case you guys are unaware, and you can see the shout out to Thomas here for TJ Stats, who does a very good job with his stats here on X. He breaks it down easily. Devin Williams had the best changeup in baseball this past year. That's why he gets such absurd swing and miss. That's why even for a pitch that isn't going to light you on fire in the sense of velocity, it just has so much ridiculous break that there's only so much you can do about it. Again, 20% above league average on that changeup when looking at the Stuff Plus, according to TJ Stats here. And this was at a minimum of 200 pitches. This is better than Jason Adam, Hayden Birdsong, Robert Suarez, who can in fact be a closer option for the Mets if Edwin Diaz signs elsewhere. Let's just pray that doesn't happen. Jacob deGrom as a surprise absolutely nobody. Jack Leiter, which is honestly pretty impressive. Ryan Pepio, who I like a lot. Griffin Jackson, who I love that pickup for the the Rays at the trade deadline from the Twins. I really want him. Mason Englert for the Rays, because of course it's a guy like Mason Englert, who I did not know too much of until now, and Tarek Skubal. That's great company for Devin Williams. So Yankees fans, continue to do your victory lap and say how much the Mets got themselves a failed reliever in Devin Williams. And when Devin Williams inevitably has a lot of success with the Mets each of the next 3 seasons, working with David Stearns again, remind you, under the David Stearns regime, Devin Williams had a sub-2 ERA as the closer across 3 seasons. That, of course, David Stearns put him in the position of, because he purposely traded Josh Hader away from the Brewers a couple of years ago when he still had over a year left of control on his contract to, in fact, pave the way for Devin Williams to be their guy. But the fact that, again, Devin Williams had 5+ suitors of really competitive contracts, another contract of 3+ years, and he said no, and he went to the Mets when he did not have a guarantee of what his role will be, is telling of how well the Mets pitched him, how confident he is in the Mets lab right now with guys like Eric Yeagers and the newly appointed pitching coach and Justin Willard, who was the director of pitching the past 2 years, did a brilliant job for the Boston Red Sox. Now, pairing that with David Stearns, where they already have a lot of rapport and familiarity, and good things are hopefully going to come of this for the Mets moving forward. But again, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below on the Devin Williams pickup and how much you love it, like it, dislike it. For me, I love it as long as Edwin Diaz returns. I also really like it if Robert Suarez comes in and the Mets have that as a 1-2 punch. Won't like it as much as Edwin Diaz, but I would still very much be happy about that in the bullpen. But it goes without saying, if Sugar Diaz does not return this Mets team, no Mets fan, rightfully so, is going to be happy about how the club operated with their bullpen this offseason. Even if they quite literally check off every single box, there's no Edwin Diaz replacement. He has handled the big pressure in New York in more ways than one after failing in 2019. That cannot be understated. He loves New York. He wants to be here. Us Mets fans and the team itself wants him to return. Stop it with this gap on a 2-year difference that Will Salmon did state in that article that we just relayed regarding Devin Williams, how the Mets are still pretty much at a sticking point at 3 years, whereas Diaz is at 5. Meet in the middle at 4 with a 5th-year option and just get the job done already. Goes without saying. But now, guys, let's go on to break down here what is next, and let's go ahead and deep dive the 13 players that Jeff Passan has linked to the New York Mets to varying degrees as trade fits for the Mets this offseason. Which ones make more sense than others? And then to wrap up the show, we'll talk more on Jeff McNeil and how he is so strongly likely, even though that probably didn't make sense with the wordplay there, to be traded this offseason by the New York Mets. I told you guys this since the start of the offseason. It became even more clear, especially after you traded for Marcus Semien. Some people have refuted that since then, and to everyone who has refuted that, I said, I got a bridge to sell you. You're talking nonsense at this point if you really think that Jeff McNeil is going to be here by the time we get a spring of 2026. If he does, that means because something went terribly wrong in the Mets' attempts to trade him this offseason. But now let's get on to this article, everybody, because this piece, again, as you guys can see here from Passan, free at ESPN, and we see here, Kylie and I ranked the top 25 trade candidates this winter and their best potential fits and the likelihood they move. With the market percolating and the winter meetings starting Sunday, there will be deals. Get your foreknowledge here, and a very good piece here. Let's go ahead and break this down from the start, everybody. We're going to go all the way to the top and begin here. So, wow, shocker. The first player in this discussion is Tarik Skubal. And unfortunately, he doesn't have Tarik Skubal as a massive lock to, in fact, be traded this offseason. He only has Skubal currently at a likelihood of being dealt at just 10%, which is honestly deflating for someone like me to see, because I want Tarik Skubal desperately in this Mets rotation. The Mets have all the assets to make it happen, so let's just go ahead, roll out the red carpet, do what you need to do, because even though Skubal is a rental, I'm very confident in saying that the Mets can do everything in their power to ink this man to a long-term contract. No doubt in my mind that in a world where the Mets would trade for Skubal, regardless of the assets that they would have to give up, that yes, that they would be able to ink him to a contract of $400+ million, whatever the case may be. But as you guys see down below, the numbers speak for itself. A 2.2 ERA, touches 100 on the gun, had 100+ strikeouts with his changeup this past year. Just nasty, nasty numbers. Over 11 strikeouts per 9 to a measly 1.5 walks per 9. Almost a 7-WAR season for now the back-to-back American League Cy Young Award winner. If there is any chance to land Tarik Skubal, the Mets have to be at the top of the list. And as you guys see beside me, the Mets are the first team mentioned by Jeff Passan as a trade fit for Skubal and his services. Now, this is where things get a bit more interesting to a degree, in my opinion, because we don't just have Tarik Skubal. Let me know, guys, if you're for or against Skubal. Again, the likelihood is not strong of him being dealt, but you have to do everything in your power to try to make that happen if you're the New York Mets, in my opinion. And if the put their foot down, the Tigers say no, it doesn't matter if you give us King's ransom, we're not going to trade him, then make sure that you don't fixate on him too long this offseason, that it gets in the way of going after other top talents, not to the same degree as Skubal, but still top talents, ace caliber starters that can impact this team right now for the better for 2026 and beyond. But the next player we have is Ketel Marte. I love Ketel Marte. I really do. Other than the fact that he's on a contract that I don't love when looking at the term, the AAV is great, but knowing he's locked down until 2031 when he's already entering his age 33 season, I don't love that personally, but what I do love is that Ketel Marte as best is the best, I think you could rightfully argue, overall, especially offensive second baseman in baseball right now. And what's more interesting than anything else is the fact that Ketel Marte is currently at a 40% chance of being traded, according to Jeff Passan. And mind you, these predictions are heavily backed by the fact that Passan is more interconnected than any other insider in Major League Baseball. So there's credibility that comes with these percentages that he relays. But to see, again, the New York Mets in this conversation still, even after landing Marcus Semien, tells you one very important thing. The Mets may get creative. And if there is a world where Ketel Marte does check off enough boxes for this Mets team, what would they do then? What would they do? You could go about this in a couple different ways. You can do A, shift Marcus Semien to be your third baseman, which makes Brett Baty more expendable, and then you could trade Baty as part of a larger deal for, say, an ace caliber starter and not lose sleep over it, and then put Marte there at second base. B, you could try Ketel Marte at third base, but there is something to be said about his lack of defensive upside in comparison to Semien. Semien is quite literally one of, if not the best defensive second baseman in all of baseball. And even though Semien is not getting any younger, entering his age 35 season or so, or age 36 for that matter, I know he's in his mid-30s right now, there's a lot more confidence and comfortability in someone like Marcus who could handle the hot corner, I think, rather comfortably in a way that maybe Ketel Marte simply couldn't. So if we're prioritizing defense, no doubt about it, Semien would make most logical sense at third, Ketel Marte at second, pairing with Lindor at short. Hopefully Alonso reunion back at first, and we are cooking, baby. That is something that we would love to see. But I want to see Alonso splitting first and DH because we know he's a defensive liability there. Ketel Marte still connected to the New York Mets even after trading for Marcus Semien. Let me know, guys, if you're for or against Ketel Marte, and I will be surprised if Mets land Ketel Marte, again, going back to the Marcus Semien move having already happened. But very much for it, should in fact happen nonetheless. Our next player, and I have the wrong stat there. My apologies. Sometimes what I do in my graphics is I'll have a player name, but I'll have the wrong guy there because I'll change it on the fly in the video. So that's just what we're going to do ahead right now. So Framber Valdez, we love him. We talked about him extensively. I shouldn't say we love him, but there are aspects to him that we really do enjoy. And I know that he's the most reliable free agent option of ace caliber starters that the Mets could land this offseason. Many believe that the Mets are going to land Framber Valdez this offseason. So to be determined. We'll see if Hector Gomez gets that right. I can tell you in confidence that the Mets have been in talks with Framber Valdez. I don't know if they're active still right now, but they have exchanged contract numbers. That's what we know to this point that I can tell you, again, in confidence. But Freddie Peralta, again, another top trade ship. Entering his final year of his contract of $8 million. The Brewers, it's already been relayed in the media that they would like to shed payroll. They would like to get a little bit down, similar to how they had it last year. And Peralta is their big trade chip for someone that we know is not going anywhere when it comes to staying in Milwaukee beyond the 2026 season. When he's a free agent, he will not be returning. Now, he's at a 25% chance of being traded right now, and the New York Mets are the top team listed for his services. Why? Because as Passan has relayed time and time again, even while doing Q&A segments on Threads, he's made it abundantly clear that, the Mets are the team that is going to be landing star pitching this offseason. They are unbelievably determined to do that, and they need to do that for the betterment of the club for 2026 and beyond. As much as we like certain aspects of the rotation, not nearly enough certainty to try to run it back with what the Mets have this past year to think you'll have better success. Far from it. So, Freddie Peralta, I love him. 176 innings, 2.7 ERA. I think he's so realistic, and honestly, I think this is where the David Stearns connections can really ring through. In similarity to Devin Williams, Peralta was traded to the Milwaukee Brewers during David Stearns' tenure as their GM. He's the man who made that move happen. And he loved Peralta from everything that we know during their time in Milwaukee together. So, again, not that the Mets are trying to become the Milwaukee Mets, but it's not our fault that the Brewers have had some very good talents over the years that would be feasible in the Mets rotation and or bullpen. We got Williams. Now let's bring on Freddie Peralta. Let me know if you guys are for or against him. If you're asking for my opinion, I think Peralta is very much one of the clearest options for the Mets to trade for this offseason. Far more realistic, in my opinion, than someone like Tarek Skubal at this point in time. Now, beyond him, let's get on to one who was far less likely to be traded, but another starter that's connected to the New York Mets. That's going to be, yes, Hunter Greene. As you guys can see here, the likelihood of Greene being traded is at 10%. Makes sense because, again, you understand Hunter Greene is the ace right now for the Reds. They're trying to compete next year, and they love that contract with a 2029 club option. They're not trading him unless they get simply a move, not a contract, but a trade that they can't say no to. Unless this is a circumstance where we're going, all, I'm going to give you an offer that you can't refuse type thing, it more than likely isn't going to happen. Hunter Green is a fantastic pitcher. It goes without saying. I apologize if my graphic is wrong down below. I don't believe it is. I see 19 games and 107.2 innings. I feel, yeah, is that on par for how many innings Green pitched this year? Because we know that he's always fluctuated with health early in his career. Let me just double check here to make sure that I didn't have this graphic wrong for you guys, because if I do, then I'm going to correct myself live in real time here. Hunter Green, we see a 2.76 ERA, and how many innings? That is going to be 107.2. Okay, so I was right. So, yep, just over 100 innings. Hunter Green, flamethrower, but falls in that Tyler Glasnow category. How healthy, how consistent are you going to get him on the health front? Even this early in his career, it's still an uncertainty. Dominant, flamethrower, would be a stud, would be an ace to pair with McNeil in this rotation, no doubt about it. But I'll have to see to believe in the case of him actually being traded this offseason. A man who I think is actually going to be dealt. And I get flack from one follower of mine on X that's a Twins fan. He gets so pissed off every time I talk about Byron Buxton. Because he's like, how dare you? How could you fathom such a thing? You're an idiot for suggesting that Buxton would be traded. He loves Minnesota. He doesn't want to go anywhere. I'm like, buddy, how much longer is Byron Buxton going to love Minnesota, okay? Cody Clemens is expected to be their first baseman. This team is by no means going anywhere but at best moving lateral, and that isn't even happening. They're in a retool rebuild. That's why they hired Derek Shelton, the same guy that they kicked to the curb for Rocco to be their manager all those years ago when he was their bench boss. They hire him after he was fired from the Pirates, mind you. You mean to tell me that Byron Buxton loves what the Twins are doing right now? I got a bridge to sell you as well. Byron Buxton, the only red flag when it comes to him is his health. He's coming off of a career season, 126 innings, 126 games rather, 97 runs scored, 35 home runs, 83 RBIs, an elite defender in center, and can of course play the corner. I think he'd be best as a guy playing the corner and DH. That way you could platoon him and maximize his health to the best of your abilities. Tremendous season for Buxton. I have been longing for this guy since we first started the platform in December of 2020. I still see the upside with him at the right price. But now, what do we see, guys? Byron Buxton's chances of being traded is at 35%. Now, why would that be the case? Because, again, how much longer is Buxton going to stay with the Twins with the way that they are operating? Unless he really has his foot down and saying, I will be a Twin until I retire no matter how good or bad they are, which means he will never win a championship with them or get close to such a thing, then okay, congrats to him and his family. But I'm not buying that for a second. Byron Buxton, and you guys can clip this, he will not finish his career as a Minnesota Twin. Or at least I should preface this. He will not only be a Minnesota Twin in his career. He may go back to sign a day contract, then retire there, but he will not be in Minnesota forever. And now feels like prime time for him to waive his no-trade clause, go on a contender. The Braves look like the top fit, mainly because, again, he is an Atlanta native type guy. Wouldn't be surprising if he preferred to go there, but the Mets have a lot that they can offer the Twins. More importantly, they have better assets that they can offer to the Twins than anything that the Braves can fathom at the moment. That's how good and how deep the Mets farm is right now. So if the Mets do have an appetite for Buxton, I can tell you in confidence that they do. They like Buxton a lot from everything that I've heard in the industry. I can't tell you if they like him more than a Bellinger, more than a Tucker, if they view him as a more realistic option than those, given his no trade. But what I can tell you is that the Mets do like Buxton. And if they did trade for him this offseason, you should not be surprised by it. The same way that I told you that don't be surprised when Devin Williams becomes a New York Met and joins the crosstown rival. I'm not right about everything, but this one is one of those that will be far from surprising should it come to fruition. You traded him over a reason, and I do feel confident that the Mets will try to replenish some of that power at minimum still in the outfield instead of allocating it all elsewhere. Now, Byron Buxton, connect to the New York Mets. Let's get on to the next one here. And Joe Ryan, his teammate. Joe Ryan, chances of being traded 50% for the ace caliber starter coming off of a tremendous season, 171 innings for the Minnesota Twins. And yes, you guessed it, the New York Mets are the second top team in the conversation. Red Sox are first, makes sense. They have abundance of assets, but so do the Mets. So it really comes down to what is more appealing to the Twins. They're looking for certain aspects of the farm that's more appealing to the Mets, then great. But they might be a little bit more swayed by Boston because the Red Sox are in a very similar situation right now to the Mets. That's why they were able to land Garrett Crochet an offseason ago. But the Mets need to flex their assets and their guns this time around, and they have to make sure that they do not lose out on a guy like Joe Ryan, to the Red Sox unless they go ahead and land another quality ace caliber starter elsewhere. If they do, that's okay. Everyone can be happy. We can all sing Kumbaya. Otherwise, I want Joe Ryan. He's a stud. We know this 2028 free agent coming off of a very good year with just under 200 strikeouts of a season and 30 starts for him. He's been consistent. He's been dominant. Entering his age 30 season would be a stud of a right-hander to pair with McNeil in this Mets rotation. 50% chance of him being traded. I like those odds. As we continue on now, everybody, we have Mr. Jarren Duran, who we've talked about a lot. And yes, Duran, another man who's connected to the New York Mets. Now, the Mets did like Duran leading up to the trade deadline, but he ended up not going anywhere for a Boston Red Sox team that ended up contending in the end. And Duran, what I love so much about him is honestly his bounce back ability. His defense fell off a cliff this past year, but in 2024, he looks like one of the best outfield options in all Major League Baseball. He had a 6+4 season, was tremendous. This year, the bat was somewhat similar to the year prior, but when you're looking at the defense, night and day difference for the wrong reasons. Duran didn't have the same level of comfortability there in the outfield, depending on where he was playing, but he's a guy that entering his age 30 season has moxie. I love the attitude that he brings. He's a no-nonsense type of guy. 16 home runs, 84 RBIs, 24 stolen bags, and that Red Sox lineup, 256, 332, 442 clip, 4-WAR season for the most part, 11% above league average. I like Duran. And if the Mets are going to prioritize more of their money, big spending for power in aspects in the infield and DH instead of the outfield, then I can stomach a Jarren Duran pickup. But I don't see a world where the Mets would land a Jarren Duran and another top outfielder. It feels like they're going to land one top outfielder and at most maybe a stopgap option like a Jake Myers that we talked about on the platform over the past day or so. You know, even Luis Robert, I can't say in confidence that the Mets would trade for Robert and add another outfielder. I really don't know if they would, because I know that they want to make sure there's room for Carson Bench. To what degree, that is yet to be seen. But Duran, nonetheless, another nice option for the Mets that they will be considering if they haven't already to this point. A lot of teams like Duran, and I don't think the Mets are the favorite to land him, but they are in his market nonetheless. Same thing can be said with Steven Kwan. Steven Kwan is a very fascinating player. But before we get to Kwan, actually, no, we'll go to Kwan, then we'll go back to Pablo Lopez. Where did I skip Kwan? Where did you go? There's Kwan. I don't know what happened there. I had this all nice and ordered, then I did it. Steven Kwan here in the top 10 of the trade chips. 30% chance of being traded, according here to, my apologies, everybody. Let me make sure I have the graphic right for you guys. Why is this thing not showing here? Okay. Steven Kwan is at a 25% chance of being traded. I apologize. And the Mets are one of the top teams listed. Now, I like Kwan. I think he would be solid if you want more of that plate setter that can hit for high contact, high average, and be a truly elite defender. Kwan is a great defender, can steal the bags well, a very good fundamentally sound player that's around a league average as a batter. My problem with Kwan, I want more. And I feel like if the Mets added someone like him to the outfield, yes, he would be shoring up defense, and yes, he'd be adding a nice contact cane. But the reality is that if the Mets don't replenish that power in other aspects in the infield and DH, they're going to be taking a step back offensively on paper heading into next season. I don't want that. So Kwan, I do like. I think that he could bring a lot of nice aspects to a lineup that can be very, very power hungry around him, which is honestly why I think Kwan could thrive in this Mets lineup in a way that Tommy Edman has the past couple of years, especially come postseason time for those LA Dodgers. So we'll see what happens on the Kwan front. I like him, don't love him as a fit, but we'll see nonetheless if he does in fact get dealt this offseason. Now let's go back to Mr. Pablo Lopez. This is a drum I've been beating for a while now. I like Pablo Lopez a lot, everybody. And Lopez was in fact going to be traded at the deadline if he didn't deal with an injury at the time. That's what derailed his season. That's why Lopez finished with only 60.2 innings, but still a 2.8 ERA. Tremendous. I really, really love him as a nice strike thrower. 9 strikeouts per 9, but a guy who can definitely go above that, to say the least, in this K per 9. I really like Pablo Lopez. I liked him a lot when he was in Miami, even though he didn't do well against the Mets a lot of times. Loved when we faced him, but he also dominated otherwise. The Mets are listed as the top team for his services, and he has a 50+% chance of being traded. So it goes without saying, if the Mets can land one of Joe Ryan or Pablo Lopez this offseason, I will be very happy. Those are ace caliber starters, and Lopez, I think, is honestly more likely given his contract status. You know, he's making, 20+ mil AAV? That is not something that I'm sure the Twins want to handle much longer if they don't have to, and that's something that the Mets can comfortably eat without a problem. And that's right in the range of a contract that's feasible for them, and they have all the assets to make it happen. So yeah, honestly, when I view all the trade chips out there in the starting pitching market, I think Pablo Lopez is one of, if not the best fit for a trade for the New York Mets. And what they would have to give up was contract statuses, his ability to dominate in the NL East the way that he was very familiar during his many years there in Miami. This is a guy who understands New York, has played in this market plenty, and that would be on our side this time. I love Pablo Lopez. If it can happen, I'm all for it. 50+% chance says it can happen. Let's see if it does in fact happen. Now to go on from Lopez, everybody, let's get on to another guy who, again, I like but I don't love. And I'm only for if the Mets trade for him, mainly in this scenario where, again, you're adding more power elsewhere. Wilyer Abreu, another outfielder that the Red Sox wouldn't mind parting ways with. Again, more of your contact type of guy, even though they fluctuated by 247 average this past year. Did have some power, so I shouldn't write him off. Had 22 home runs, 69 RBIs, 53 runs scored, 6 stolen bags, a 2.4 WAR season, 10% above league average as a batter. Not a free agent until 2030, entering his age 27 season. And Abreu right now is a guy that could impact the Mets on a very similar level to what Brandon Nimmo is doing from an offensive standpoint, especially when we look at those numbers down below. And he is a solid defender, so that is something to be said too. But how much is a guy like a Wilyer Abreu really going to be a needle mover for you? I'm not entirely sure. So Abreu is one of these guys that, again, I like, but I don't love. And I think if the Mets have an opportunity to land someone more superior in the outfield, they should do so. But again, I do have respect for Abreu's game. I don't think it would be the end of the world by any stretch if the Mets landed him. I just don't think that he's necessarily the best fit for the club at this point in time. Abreu there, another lefty bat for the outfield, bat doesn't have the upside like a Tucker or a Bellinger, even though, home runs speak for itself. 22 this past season, very respectable. Nonetheless, Mets are one of an abundance of teams connected to him at a 50+% chance of being traded. Beyond Abreu, we have Mr. Kris Bubic. And Bubic, we've talked about on the platform before. As soon as his name was first mentioned in trade talks, I said, this would be a nice pickup for the Mets. Bubic is coming off of his first ever season where he was a starter that was good. His first couple years in the league as a Kansas City Royal, he didn't perform all that well. Then he dealt with injury that derailed most of his 2024 season or so, but looked good when he was utilized as a reliever type. Now 2025 as a starter, 20 games, 116+ innings, 2.5 ERA, just over 3 expected ERA. Southpaw that doesn't throw hard, a soft tosser, but does a very good job in doing so. His chance of being traded this offseason is at 30%. And yes, the Mets are the top team, the first team listed here by Jeff Passan. So it goes without saying, any good, fairly controllable, or even in this case, a rental pitcher and Bubic, do not be surprised if the Mets are connected to all these guys, as the Mets are adamant to add clear starting pitching for them for 2026 and beyond. I like Bubic, don't love him, but if the Mets landed him, I just would want to make sure that they landed an ace starter as well. You can't settle with just Bubic, who's coming off of a career season when we don't know how healthy he's going to be, for one, and two, again, he's a rental, so there's some risk involved when you're trading for someone like him. He's a guy that, for example, if the Royals had an appetite for it, I think it would make plenty of sense. If the Mets maybe attached a prospect to a certain degree, or another somewhat MLB-ready asset with Jeff McNeil, because I think McNeil makes a lot of sense for the Royals as a Jonathan India replacement, because he's better than Jonathan India right now. India was terrible his first year there in Kansas City, and that 1-for-1 swap with Brady Singer, great trade for the Reds in hindsight. McNeil can also play the corner for you comfortably as well. He's a veteran on a small market team that I think would make a lot of sense. So, not saying it's going to happen, but McNeil, Bubic, and maybe some more assets that the Mets would have to give up wouldn't shock me if that something along those lines happened this offseason. And now going on from Chris, let's get on to our next one here that we have connected to the New York Mets, and that, surprisingly, isn't Edward Cabrera. And now, I guess the belief here, because the Mets aren't connected to Sandy in this article either, is that the Mets will not get an in-division trade after the success the Marlins had this past year. Frustrating knowing that Peter Bendix just gave away Jesus Luzardo for nothing to the Phillies. And right now, Luzardo would be our second best pitcher behind Nolan McLean. Pisses me off. Pissed me off then. Pisses me off now. I love Jesus Luzardo. And man, does that trade sting. So that schmuck can trade in the division with the Phillies. But when it comes to the Mets, oh no, I want nothing to do with it. Hate to see it. Nonetheless, we're not talking about Cabrera, but we are talking about Mitch Keller. And Mitch Keller, same conversation as Kris Bubic, a guy who I think would be solid, nice middle of the rotation starter for you, at worst a back-end guy coming off of a season where 4.1 ERA, 4.4 expected ERA, not the sexiest numbers, nor does he have a great K to walk ratio, but he's someone that can be fairly reliable for you to give you north of 200 innings next season, and again, be someone that can hopefully give you 30-plus starts and be solid. Have starts where at times he looks very good and hopefully will do well in the Mets lab, and other starts where he looks like, yeah, he's more of your clear number number 4 or 5 in the rotation. But again, a guy that, in my opinion, makes sense as long as you're going after another ace salon with him. Right now, he has a 60% chance of being traded, and the New York Mets are one of multiple teams in on his market, at least according to Passan, in the sense of it making sense. Next up, Luis Robert. Shouldn't be surprised by this one. I'm telling you guys, I think that there's absolutely still a world where the Mets trade for Luis Robert. I really do. Robert's someone that, yes, his numbers aren't sexy as you see down below at all, making $20+ million this year. Not overly great for the White Sox, but his value can't be what it was at the trade deadline. It's now 2 straight seasons of not looking great with the bat. Defense, we know, can be awesome with him. He's clear bounce back candidate in a good organization that has a far deeper lineup, something along those lines. That's how I feel about Luis Robert. And Robert's one of these guys, if you can get him at, pennies in comparison to what the White Sox were initially asking, you go ahead and you do that. 60% chance of him being traded. The Mets are one of 4 teams there as fits, according to Jeff Passan. Let me know if you're for or against Robert in the comments down below. I am, as long as Robert is in your lone outfield acquisition. If he is, then I'm not going to be all that happy, depending on the other moves that the Mets may find themselves doing. But beyond Luis Robert, everybody, that's it. Because now we have to talk about why you may have clicked on that video, and this video rather, and that is, yes, Jeff McNeil, the final player, number 25 out of 25 in this list for Jeff Passan. And unlike any other player that was in this discussion, Jeff McNeil is at an 80% chance of being traded. So, yes, goes without saying, McNeil's a goner, okay? And it also goes in hand with the fact that, with the exception of the San Francisco Giants, the teams that we had talked about over the past week as fits for McNeil that have been reported, and the Pittsburgh Pirates, the Seattle Mariners, and what I threw out there before it was even public was the Kansas City Royals. Now Passan has Royals in the mix. I'm telling you guys, whether it's for Chris Bubich, whether you give up McNeil and a bunch of other assets to go big after a Cole Reagans, whatever the case may be, I do think that that could be a realistic trade partner with the New York Mets, with Jeff McNeil being a factor in it. Now, again, with Jeff, we know his value comes with his versatility. We know that he, of course, is entering his age 34 season, and we know that right now he could be our starting left fielder, given Brandon Nimmo being traded. But the Mets didn't trade Brandon Nimmo for Jeff McNeil to get consistent outfield reps, okay? It goes without saying, but McNeil is, in fact, going to be traded this offseason. It's been reaffirmed now quite clearly from the most credible man in the media space when covering Major League Baseball, Jeff Passan, 80%. And just to remind you guys, he's the only player in this article that's at 80% to be dealt. We see 50% for the next that you guys will. I'm just going to scroll up. There's 50% for Alec Boehm. We have 25% for Brady Singer. We have 30% for Sandy Alcantara, 60% for Luis Robert, 25% for Jake Cronenworth, 60% for Mitch Keller, 40% for Edward Cabrera. We're also looking at 25 for Brandon Lowe, 15 for Wilson Contreras, 25 for Yandy Diaz, 30 for Chris Bubich, 50 for Willie Abreu, 35 for CJ Abrams, 75 for Brendan Donovan. So again, even higher than Brendan Donovan, mind you. 25 for Stephen Kwan, 30 for Mackenzie Gore, who I would love him, but we know it probably ain't going to happen in the division like that. 50 for Lopez, 50 for Duran, 50 for Ryan, 35 for Buxton, 10 here for Hunter Green, 25 for Freddie Peralta, 40 for Ketel Marte, and just 10 for Tarek Skubal. That is all that you guys need to know from all the latest that Jeff Passan dropped as of today, everybody. I would like to thank you guys all so much again for taking the time to hit that like and subscribe on your way in and on your way out in this video. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below to what we had to break down this one, not only on McNeil, Devin Williams, but ultimately the abundance of Mets targets, thanks to Jeff Passan connecting them to a whopping 13. And if I'm not mistaken, the Mets were connected with more players in this list than any other team as well. You guys can quote me on that, because I'm not going to go ahead and do the math right now. But just with the glance of the eye test, it did appear that the Mets were mentioned with more players than anyone else involved. That's exciting. What does that tell you? The Mets are inevitably going to continue to make moves, everybody. It's just a matter of, out of these players in the trade market, who exactly are they going to land? Are they going to surprise us with other players that we haven't talked about at this point? Maybe. No one was really talking about Marcus Semien until it happened, so I won't put anything past David Stearns. But again, guys, let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for watching. Be on the lookout for more continued coverage on all things New York Mets all offseason long. Big week ahead as we get closer to winter meetings this Sunday. And again, folks, we'll be live every single day of winter meeting coverage. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, leading into Wednesday. And then we have the Rule 5 draft. Busy bee time over the next 2 weeks. And beyond that for the entire month of December, everybody. But nonetheless, thank you so much for the support. Really appreciate it. I'll see you all again here tomorrow. Let's go Mets, baby. Peace out, folks.